Welcome to another edition of the Game Preview Podcast. Ethan Greenberg, Cynthia Frelund, Week 14. It's December football. It's crazy, Cynthia, that we're in Week 14, first of all. It feels like we just started season number 2 of the Game Preview Podcast like yesterday.
I mean, it certainly does. And just so you know, Gordy, our team mascot, our podcast mascot, he's put on 12 pounds since being home with me. He's been home with me for 4 weeks. And he's 12 pounds heavier. He's already over 40 pounds. This dog's going to be huge.
Which, by the way, if you're just listening to this for the first time, makes it sound like Cynthia's just like feeding her dog and getting our podcast mascot, also known as Cynthia's dog, like really fat with treats. That's not the case. Gordy needed the food. So actually, it's a good omen that Gordy is 12 pounds heavier. It's a good omen around the Jets vibe right now, even though the Jets are coming off a loss in Minnesota. Final score 27-22. And we're going to talk a little bit about that matchup. But this is Week 14. This is an important matchup. Division matchup, conference matchup. The Jets already beat the Bills Week 9 at MetLife Stadium. But what do you expect this matchup? Like, how do you expect this to be different from both teams' perspective? Obviously, some lineup changes, but also the Bills and Jets, you would imagine, might throw a couple wrinkles in their game plans.
Well, I mean, I think the lineup changes are like the reason for the wrinkles in what's going to be different. I mean, this is a special matchup. I think the Bills have this one circled because I think, their season, they have huge expectations this season, and then the Jets came out of nowhere and surprised them at home. And now it's interesting because you just, as of our recording of this, like Von Miller was just ruled out for the rest of the season. Obviously, we knew he wasn't going to be playing in this game ahead of today, but for the rest of the season is a pretty significant change. Their secondary has been a little bit healthier, Tre'Davious White coming back. And then, of course, no bigger lineup change. And then the other side of the ball, that's Mike White. And so Mike White's presence here, especially with how Garrett Wilson has turned into a bona fide number one wide receiver, that's going to be interesting because with less pressure potentially coming off that defensive front and the secondary still not being 100%, it's an interesting matchup. And, of course, I love our guy Zonovan Smith. We have to talk about him, too. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned him because this is going to be a long-winded answer. Like, there's a reason why I'm going to start telling this story, and it's all going to come together here. When the Jets and the Bills played in Week 9, obviously, Zach Wilson was starting quarterback. He had a career-high passer rating, a career-high completion percentage that game. The Jets ran the ball so well in Week 9. That's really what helped them win over the Bills. Final score 20-17 at MetLife. Now, that game was pretty much Michael Carter and James Robinson. To your point, Zonovan Bam Knight has really been the guy the past 2 weeks, especially last week without Michael Carter. Michael Carter, a full participant in Wednesday's practice, so it seems like the Jets will get him back for Sunday at Buffalo. But what kind of spark, other than what you see on film, like what kind of numbers behind Zonovan Bam Knight make him a good option for the Jets, not only the past 2 weeks, but also for the rest of the season and potentially further than that?
So first off, I want to call him Zonovan Smith because I grew up with someone named Zonovan Smith, which is hilarious because who's named Zonovan? So Zonovan Knight, I clearly know his actual name, but it's just very funny that always, like, how does that even happen, right? But if I look to see last game, those 90 rushing yards, of course, he had 118 total from scrimmage, but those 90 rushing yards specifically, where were they earned? 72 of them were earned on rushes outside the numbers. He had very strong results in that situation, like 8.2 yards per rush. And those outside the numbers rushes are really a nice indicator because those are longer rushes, right? Inside the numbers, that's great. That can be a function of really great blocking too sometimes. But his ability to get to the outside was really special. Also catching those passes, 5 for 28, like that's a really big number. Remember, we saw in that last win, targeting kind of that intermediate, the linebacker level where the Bills have been injured or not. I saw something about Matt Milano come across my screen before we started this. But that linebacker level was really where they had success last time. And our guy Z, he can be able to do that really well.
Also, Matt Milano, one of the Buffalo Bills players who did not play in Week 9 against the Jets. Obviously, he's expected to play this weekend unless something crazy happens.
Let's see what just happened. Something just happened about it. I just think it says, Dable
you let us
says,
know.
Not Dable. McDermott says Matt Milano has a knee injury and is considered day-to-day. Left tackle Deion Dawkins will be out at practice, quote, a little bit. So those are 2 more injuries to keep. I'm going to practice a little bit today. I'm going to
All right,
podcast a little bit today.
Let me ask you this. Let's start with the defense for the Bills. Between Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, and Jordan Poyer, the three starters who did not play against the Jets, who is the most important to that defense?
Against the Jets, probably whoever lines up against Garrett Wilson, which to me, I know it sounds weird to say the safety, but the way that the Bills play their defense, the way that Leslie Frazier kind of structures things, it's weird. This season, I haven't really seen Tre'Davious White go one-on-one because they're folding him back in after injury. So I actually think like Jordan Poyer is probably the most clutch one there, but I don't like this the get home guy because like we know Garrett Wilson's gonna like align in the out and the wide position and just run roughshod over you. So I don't know. It's one of those two probably, I would think, in this matchup, but equal and opposite, equal, maybe equally.
Yeah, I think that Jordan Poyer, I think if you're a Jets fan and you're familiar with the Bills, obviously Jordan Poyer means so much to that defense, and Micah Hyde, who's out for the year with a neck injury. Poyer's also such a good tackler, even despite leading the team with 4 interceptions. So if the Jets want to run the football, which you would imagine they would, given that was kind of the recipe for success, not only for the season, but specifically Week 9 against the Bills, you would imagine Jordan Poyer will have a big hand in trying to stop the run, along with Matt Milano if he plays. And then to Cynthia's point, what you brought up, Deion Dawkins, day-to-day, he will be at practice a little bit. Spencer Brown, the right tackle, didn't play against the Jets. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces. But on the Jets' perspective, to put a bow on the first quarter here, Mike White did not play in that game. He has played against the Bills in the past. Not a pretty game. Robert Saleh said the Bills just they scored 21 points so quickly around the second and third quarter. Like, they scored before the half. They scored coming out of the kickoff of the second half, and then Mike White threw an interception, which then led to another touchdown. So that was kind of a snowball effect. What kind of performance do you expect from Mike White against this Bills defense after Mike White just put up 369 yards against the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, look, the Bills secondary isn't as generous as the Vikings secondary. The Bills have their injuries like we talked about. So I would imagine a more balanced approach because you don't want to get in that situation. The Bills play zone really effectively, and zone was tripping up Mike White last game. So I would imagine they're probably going to be more balanced between runs or short passes that approximate runs and not really rely on such deep passes like we saw last time in the last game. I think that this game will ultimately go the Jets' way if something similar can happen to last time. And that's if they can really get pressure on Josh Allen and effectively with just 4. And that's really I know we'll get into that in a minute, but from the Jets' offensive perspective, if the defense can help them out and the offense can stay balanced so that you're getting that nice run production, those outside runs from Zonovan Knight, like et cetera, like that's the script, is to control the ball.
All right, well, let's move on to the second quarter. Let's just kind of take a look at what's happened with Buffalo since the last time the Jets have played them. And this is more than just the injury bit, which we just covered. Yep. The Bills lose to the Jets Week 9. Then they lose to the Vikings in Buffalo, which was a wild, wild game against the Minnesota Vikings. Mm-hmm. Then the Bills rifle off 3 straight. The Browns, the Lions, and then the Patriots on Thursday Night Football. And it almost feels like people are so accustomed to Buffalo playing at such a high level, and they're like, you know what, like, Buffalo hasn't been playing at that kind of level the past couple games, meaning Minnesota, Cleveland, and Detroit, but do you think they started to figure it out against New England, or is that just like a good matchup for the Bills, and they took advantage of it?
Well, so there's 2 things that I'm looking at here that are cause for concern, and both of them are really around Josh Allen. The first is the deep passing situation. Obviously, that elbow injury that he sustained during the Jets game. And after that, so before that, 111 passer rating, 55.2 completion 55.2% completion percentage, and 6 passing touchdowns on deep passes in weeks 1 through 8. Those are both top numbers. I know 55.2 rather doesn't sound good, but that was good for 3rd in the NFL on deep passes. So there are 20 plus air yard attempts. Over the last 5 weeks, his passer rating's down to 68.9, a 36 completion percentage, and 1 passing touchdown with 1 interception. So the deep passing, so those quick game-changing deep passes, that's been an issue. Could be part of his elbow situation. And then the other thing that's interesting are the turnovers. He has 11 interceptions, which is tied with Davis Mills for the second most in the NFL, and only Matt Ryan has more with 13 interceptions. Those turnovers have been absolutely devastating for the Bills. And what happened in the last game is you saw the Bills have an uptick in production from their run game. So they figured out a little bit more with James Cook. They figured out a little bit more with Devin Singletary. They got a little bit further along, so they weren't having those turnovers. And I think what we saw in that Patriots game was not turning the ball over, which was a lot of a key factor, a very, very big deal, and a lot different from what we saw from some of the previous games.
And, of course, when the Jets and Bills played, Josh Allen threw 2 interceptions, one to Jordan Whitehead, one to Sauce Gardner. Both were, I think, got the Twitter response of, like, bad interceptions, right? It wasn't like a deflected pass. It was kind of like, oh, like, what are you doing here? Like where were you going with the ball? And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, for the Jets, they've forced one turnover over the last 3 games, the one being against the Chicago Bears late in the game, C.J. Mosley's diving interception. So the Jets, who were very good at turning the football over, have not been doing so lately. Now that the Jets are playing the Bills and Josh Allen in Buffalo, how much, like, I don't know if there are any numbers that exist, but when you're facing a team for a second time in the same season and you're going to their place and it's like, is there anything that changes really, do you think, from a numbers perspective, like the odds of beating a same team twice in a season?
Yeah, it's less about same team twice from the standpoint of like mental and more about like when you know people's tendencies and what they do, you have a better chance to upset them. It's very hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. The second time, they often both have more information on each other. Now, the thing that's different in this Jets and Bills matchup is that the information that they have at the quarterback position is very limited. It's not like Mike White was playing in that first game. There's been actually quite a few personnel changes just from an injury standpoint between the 2 weeks. So when I'm looking at this game from the number standpoint, it's really more about recency and where the potential areas to exploit are. I mean, without as much of a pass rush from the Bills, who are still able to rush the passer even without Von Miller, but it's not quite the same level of efficiency or the same speed, that's going to be problematic still. It's not like that goes away and they're just not going to be able to get any pressure. And then at the same time, it's just the speed with which it happens. So Mike White, maybe it will look a little bit more like it did, maybe not necessarily as good as it did against the Bears because the Bears didn't bring a fast pass rush, but it's not going to be as fast as we saw in that first game where the pass rush was much quicker because Von Miller brings up the average speed to rush.
All right. Well, that brings us to our halftime. And I don't have any topics to bring up.
But I do.
If you okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So here's my question. It's getting cold in New York.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. It's getting cold where you live, not where I live.
Listen, I used to live there too. You can move out too. It can happen. But look, if you're a New Yorker, is it acceptable to go ice skating in Rockefeller Center? Because I want to go so bad, and my friends, they think it's a little too touristy for them. Okay,
I totally get what your friends are saying, but where else would you go? Because every place is touristy. So if you go to Rockefeller Center, touristy. If you go to Bryant Park, touristy. Maybe a little less, but still touristy. If you go to Woolman Rink in Central Park, pretty freaking touristy. So all of this to say is I think it's acceptable. Okay. I'm giving it the acceptable stamp as long as you know that you will be maddened by having so many people around you because you really won't be able to like freely skate.
I'm not gonna like be doing tricks, right? I just want to go like have a skate.
You weren't gonna do like a triple axel or something?
I'm gonna be that person who like wears the full spandex outfit and like does the twirl. Oh, yeah. You know, like. No, are you done with your holiday shopping?
That's a good question. I think so. If not, I'm pretty darn close.
Good job.
Thank you. I was pretty good this year. I got ahead of the game. I found some Black Friday deals. I decided, you know what? Just get it. And if you want to go somewhere else, something else comes about, just return it. And I'm usually not like that because I don't like the whole process of like you got to buy it, then you got to return it. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just do it, and we'll see where the chips fall. So I'm feeling good about it.
This is so mature of you.
Thank you. New year, new me. I'm an age wiser or a year wiser, year more mature. We're here. We're in the cut. What about you? Are you behind or what?
Yep. I'm really behind.
Have you started? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep. I got all my I think I found the best gift ever for my my coworkers at NFL Network. Yeah. I'm very excited about that. But my family, nothing yet. Nope, not one thing. Nothing yet. But we're getting there. But I also definitely want to explain my outfit for the people who can see us, because I'm dressed a little bit like Elizabeth Holmes, which is hilarious. I had to do a women in tech. I did a women in tech forum this morning, which I was really excited to do. Yeah. Just talk about because I code, I do all that other nerdy stuff, and I get to talk about my nerdy stuff. But I don't know why this morning I guess I just decided to dress like Steve Jobs or like Elizabeth Holmes.
Oh yeah, very nice. I'm going to look up where Elizabeth Holmes is from, because maybe there's a connection there. Let's see.
She better not be from Michigan. We don't need any more people that are a little nuts.
No, she's born Washington D.C. So,
got it.
But
great.
But she went to Stanford, did not get her degree, so that's maybe California, maybe.
It's really far away.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to help you out here. You know what? You are Elizabeth Holmes, and we just figured it out. So, thank you. All right. You got anything else you want to bring up? Oh, I know. I'm not behind on my gift giving, but there's one person that I'm missing, and it's Gordy. That's right. Yeah. Gordy needs some Jets something.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. Is there Jets treats? I mean, the dog loves food. And it was funny. We were talking about Gordy still needs to put on weight. Gordy was very malnourished when I got him. So now he's a growing pup. He's going to be big, I think.
I like how you say we, because if you're a loyal listener, you know that that we've been a part of the Gordy journey.
Yeah, absolutely we have. So, he's doing good though. He's doing good. He's cute.
I think that's a perfect way to end halftime. Elizabeth Holmes, Gordy, and Jets treats.
We covered it all here, really.
All right. I don't even know where I was going to go after that. So instead, this is what we're going to do. Let's talk about Mike White a little bit, because what does, in your opinion, need to happen, not necessarily this week and beyond, essentially, for you to really start believing the hype train and believe that there is something to Mike White as a future starting NFL quarterback? Also, I will say, are we past that point for you, or you still need to see a little more because it is such a small sample size for him?
I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said about the fact that, I'm not in the locker room, I don't know, but the fact that all of the guys wear Mike White t-shirts and stuff, I don't know. I feel if they believe, I believe, right? If they're going to go and do that, I'm in. I just feel I don't know. I kind of like that his wife was who are you after that first game too? That it's just great. Right. So I don't know. And as far as pure numbers are concerned, of course, no, it'd be very it'd be not good data for me to tell you that I already believe in him and whatever, but I don't know. I'm not the coach. And if the coach is pulling him out on the field and having him play, then I'm just going to believe the coach. Right. So at the end of the day, I see a lot of things that are very promising. Like anyone that doesn't have a lot of reps, there are areas to improve. And as he gets more reps, we'll see who he becomes. But as far as the story and what I've seen so far and how happy he seems to make the other guys, all in on that. And this elite defense and special teams, both of those things are really, really good. And so it's not no one's asking him to be Patrick Mahomes, right? He just needs to be Mike White. And that's actually interesting. And what I think that means is being Mike White is using the right blend of types of passes, meaning short, deep, intermediate, that create opportunities for him. What you've seen from Garrett Wilson is the ability to draw coverages so that other guys are open. Corey Davis was open, so at least 3 yards of cushion on 41 of 45 routes run last game. And what does that mean? Well, target him. That's where he got his catches. And that's great. Maybe it doesn't look great on Garrett Wilson's stat sheet, but it looks great on Mike White's. You know why? Because it means he was smart enough to recognize who was open and get it to that person.
Okay. Lot to unpack there. A lot of great numbers, especially about Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson. But for Mike White, I feel like if you're a Jets fan and you're looking at Twitter and you're on Jets Twitter, like the hype train's out of the station for sure. Understood, okay? He's thrown for 300-plus yards. He threw for 369 yards last week against the Vikings and really gave the Jets a chance to win that game, especially late. But having this be his now going into his 6th career start, Cynthia, what are things that you see that you think Mike White needs to improve upon? Because it feels like everything is so positive about Mike White, so positive about the Jets. But I just want to know, like, what are some things that, in fact, he does need to work on for this Jets team as we move forward in the rest of the season here?
All right, let's just look at the stats because this will show us. He was 9 of 19 for 162 yards and 2 interceptions on in-breaking routes, okay? And as opposed to 130 yards and 14 of 22 on out-breaking routes. Basically what that tells me is that Harrison Smith, don't go anywhere near him. How about that? That was the situation, right? The other thing that's a little concerning, and this one's maybe a little bit more concerning because this is about space, is the 24 of 42 for 279 yards and 2 interceptions versus zone coverage. Now, that's interesting because zone and man, now that's where his inexperience to me is showing up. That's where all of these quarterbacks' inexperience shows up. In college, and man is easier for a quarterback to understand. Don't throw it to X, they are blanketed by Y. Got it, understood. But now you have to be able to figure out zone in order to succeed in the NFL. That's the difference between, Patrick and Joe Burrow years 2 through 5 versus when they first start out. There's big splits in the beginning, and then they seem to be busting those splits after that. So it's also a little concerning that he was 9 of 24 and with an interception on passes of 10 plus air yards. So that's a lot of attempts and not a lot of completions. Yes, there were 234 yards earned on that, but the interception is problematic. So look, especially when you see something like, Corey Davis being able to be wide open on some of those other routes. Now, I don't know what was called, so I don't know if he was part of the options of, the checkdowns, et cetera. I don't know, but I do know that those are areas that will have to improve, and they figure to improve for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is the more you see zone, the better you are diagnosing it and the better you are at stopping it. And when you have such a good defensive-minded head coach, then they can tell you little tricks because all defense is process of elimination, right? So if the quarterback can understand what the defense is thinking, then he can now understand if you understand the principles of what the zone is doing, then you can beat them because that means there's holes in the zone and you can target those areas.
That was an incredible breakdown. And this matchup, I think, we would both agree is the most difficult of the season so far for Mike White after seeing the Bears and the Vikings, now seeing the Buffalo Bills, who are very good.
By an order of magnitude. This is a much more difficult game. Yes.
This is definitely a step up in weight class, especially from a Bills perspective. Not only do they have good players, they've played in the same system for so long that they know the ins and outs of it. They're very smart, very fundamentally sound. So this is going to be an interesting test, especially when you think about how Mike White played against the Bills last year. 4 interceptions, no touchdowns. Robert Saleh said that game's stats maybe not indicative of how Mike White really would have played, especially because the Jets were in desperate come-from-behind mode, so he needed to throw the ball.
Totally different pass catchers, too.
Yeah.
It was a way different situation. Mm-hmm.
So something to keep in mind for Sunday, which you said pass catchers, that leads us right into the fourth quarter. I just kind of want to talk about the pass catchers for both of these teams, and let's start with the Bills. Stefon Diggs had 93 yards against the Jets in Week 9. 42 of them, I believe, came on the first drive on one catch. And it was kind of this is going to sound maybe kind of silly, like a quiet 93 yards.
Yep.
Josh Allen targeted Stefon Diggs late in the game. DJ Reed broke it up. So that obviously had the potential to be a game-changing play, a huge reception. The Jets end up winning that game. The Jets, all things considered, have done a pretty good job against elite wide receivers. Stefon Diggs is probably the one that had the best statistical day. But what about Stefon Diggs makes him so difficult to guard compared to, or do you think it was just a one-game thing and Jets hadn't seen him yet, Sauce Gardner hadn't seen him yet, DJ Reed hadn't seen him yet, he got him, and then this matchup, you think it'll be any different or you think it'll be about the same?
So I think that Stefon Diggs versus Sauce Gardner is going to be like a very fun one for football fans for years to come. And I think it's going to be like, that's going to be like a really good one. But now, some of the things that are different. So first of all, Sauce Gardner has some splits in terms of where he lines up, right? Like it's not a lot of movement. He stays in his spot and he's not moving around. They're trying to figure it out for him in that regard. And Stefon Diggs, he moves all over the formation. So that's going to be, it's not going to be this one-on-one like Revis Island. I loved that. I loved when people used to say that. It's not going to be like that necessarily because that's just not how Sauce is used. And they use Diggs in a lot of different ways. Like the hitch is like, he's best at the hitch. Like he has, he's pretty close to some like pretty prolific marks Diggs is. So like, look, like he's a very, 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 very good receiver. And this is a good one you can like bring up with your friends at the bar on Sunday when you're watching the game. When Diggs scores, it's not predictive at all. It's just fun. When Diggs scores a touchdown, the Bills are 8-0 in this season. And when he doesn't, they're 1-3, including in the Jets loss in week 9. So that's an interesting look. Again, it's not predictive. It's just interesting. But the alignment matchup is going to be where if Diggs has success, I don't think it's going to come in Sauce's coverage. I don't think it's going to come in Reed's coverage. It's going to become somewhere where there's a zone play and he's found the seam in the zone. Like they have a lot of chemistry between the two of them, between he and Josh Allen. They've got a lot of plays that, are designed to be man beaters and designed to find areas of the defense to exploit. So they're not going to be like, hey, let's just put Sauce against, Stefon Diggs on every play and see what happens. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to be more strategic than that.
It's very interesting to me because last time these teams played, it was DJ Reed who saw the most of Stefon Diggs,
100%.
especially late in the game. So That's something to keep in mind. Also, I remember DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner both saying leading up to that game, what makes Diggs such an interesting player to guard is that his route running is so unconventional because he might be supposed to run a certain route and he'll just break it off because he knows that his quarterback is thinking the same way. So that's very difficult to defend. Right? Yeah.
By the way, so you know, the next gen stats show that Reed and Diggs was 42.4% of the wide receivers routes. So, and like, I think Sauce, it was like he only allowed one reception to Diggs, but they only lined up on 2 of Diggs' routes 2 times when he was. And that was on shifts. So the receiver shifted from the opposite side of the field. So they were like, yeah, what are you doing? Like Sauce is great. Like, let's not do that. So it's not going to be this one-on-one thing at all.
And also the last time the Jets and the Bills played, what's interesting is that so not only did Stefon Diggs have 90-plus yards, so did Garrett Wilson. It was also like a quiet 92-yard game. It was like 1 yard of separation between the two of them. Also, just by the way, the guy that led the Bills after Stefon Diggs was Gabe Davis. He had 2 catches for 33 yards. So the Jets did a very good job against Josh Allen. But Garrett Wilson, that game and forward, really feels like has started to emerge as, to your point, the number 1 receiver for the Jets and a number 1 receiver in the NFL. Do you anticipate now, especially coming off the games against Chicago and Minnesota that Buffalo might scheme him up a little differently and try to make someone else beat him?
Oh, I am. Okay, there's a couple of things that I would bet the house on if I were a betting person, which I work for the NFL, so we don't do that. But if there was number 1, it's that Leslie Frazier is well aware that with 55 yards that Garrett Wilson becomes the new Jets rookie receiving leader in receiving yards on a season, besting Keyshawn Johnson. Now, it's only it's only been 12 games, right? So he's going to break that record. But I don't think Leslie Frazier, he's going to be like, you're going to really let this happen against us? That's their bulletin board material. I'm sure that he knows that. I am, like I said, I would bet the house if I knew that. Now, I would also bet the house that Garrett Wilson's like, I want to do this against you. I want to make this happen against your defense because it even means more to me in that situation. So, look, I think it's your best versus my best. Let's see how they roll out. But he is commanding number 1 attention. He has already. Last game we saw it. You saw tight coverage. They would play hybrid zone man schemes, meaning you get man on Garrett Wilson, you get zone for everybody else, which was like a really nice compliment to Garrett Wilson, considering, he had a pretty darn good game too. So at the end of the day, it's that wide alignment from Wilson where he's had all of the success. 142 of his 162 yards last game all came when he was aligned wide. 2 touchdowns against the Bears both came from the wide alignment. Like, good luck figuring out which route he's going to run. He's actually kind of the exact opposite style runner of Stefon Diggs, meaning Garrett Wilson runs incredibly precise routes. He has since Ohio State. Ryan Day will tell you that if you talk to him and ask him about, like, this is what he does, where Stefon Diggs is like improv routes. I'm like, what is that route that you just ran? I don't even know. So it's just a different sort of beast, which is why I'm like, does the safety cover him? Is it really going to be a corner? But they will give him the number 1 treatment. And again, you should see other guys being more open because of it. Well, is it Corey Davis is going to be more open? Probably not the same person. I think, Corey Davis being open was more of a, like, maybe the Vikings didn't have enough personnel to cover him and they had to make a decision. So they chose Wilson. But, at this case, I think, I don't know who it will be, but I think Corey Davis will get a little bit more respect in this one too.
I think we're on the same wavelength here, because this was going to be my final question of the podcast. You led me right to it. It's like leading a horse to water, and yes, I am drinking the water. If Garrett Wilson is schemed up the way that you expect the Bills to, where they don't want him to have a good game, let's say even an average game, they don't want Garrett Wilson to have. So who needs to step up for the Jets between, I'm not going to say the player's name, but like it could be a receiver, it could be a tight end, it could be a running back out of the backfield. Like, who is the X factor for the Jets, not named Garrett Wilson and not named Corey Davis for this weekend?
My guess, because I think Tremaine Edmonds is back to being 100% healthy, and I don't know about Matt Milano yet. That will make a difference. Now, if there's a bunch of space missing in the middle of that defense, then look for short passes by the running back. But there's this guy. His name begins with an E, and that receiver figures to be in a good spot for maybe some holes where Micah Hyde is not. I don't know his name, but it begins with an E.
For those who are just listening and can't read lips, does his name start with the same letter that my name starts with?
It does. Okay. It does.
Yeah, my name is Ethan, by the way.
Ethan. Yeah, but that would be just based on the routes that I've seen run, right? Like, now, right. Could they come out with a completely different game plan to fight? Absolutely. Sure. But just on kind of mismatches of routes here, if you have a big E game, then
right.
Some exciting things are going to happen. All right, I'm going to stop
now. No, I heard it. That's the problem with the English language, right? Like, 2 words could start with an E and totally different sounding words. Also, but
that's again, just a guess. Zonovan Knight could be like, right. It could be short passes to him, but I just feel like that seems like something they aren't going to let happen twice, right? That's what happened last time, and it's like, don't make the same mistake twice. But I think we don't know what the plan is for E, and so maybe based on things we've seen before, that could be an area to exploit.
All right. That's how we're going to wrap up Week 14 of the Game Preview Podcast. Jets-Bills in Buffalo. And for any Jets fan that's listening and wants to go to Buffalo in December, 1, God bless you. 2, can you give them the recommendation of your favorite Buffalo wing spot again? Is it Bar Bill?
Bar Bill. Mm-hmm.
Bar Bill.
I tried them all because, of course, I'm not going to like make an ill-informed decision. But Bar Bill is the best. It's not quite like downtown, but you can usually get like Uber Eats or whatever. Whatever service you'd like to deliver you food can bring you it if you're staying downtown. But it's like maybe 10 minutes away, which to them is like, oh, it's so far away. And like you and I, like who've lived in cities, we're like, is it?
Yeah. It's not. But Bar Bill. All right. Make sure to go to Bar Bill. And yeah, we'll see you next week for the Game Preview Podcast, Week 15. Jets coming back to MetLife, but instead, or for now, should I say, going to Buffalo.
Who are they playing?
I think they'll have to tune in next week. Might be from Cynthia's
we'll
hometown.
Find out. Stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly.